The Galactic Academic Exchange Program had placed 43 species under one roof at Varith Station's University District, and most of them had quietly agreed on one unspoken rule. You did not approach a Croth cub. Not because the cubs were dangerous, though they were, in the way that all young predators are dangerous, unpredictably, enthusiastically, and without malice. The real reason was simpler. Croth packs were territorial about their young in a way that made most sentient species deeply nervous. If a Croth cub so much as cried near a stranger, the nearest adult would appear within seconds, teeth visible, spine fur raised, and a sound in their chest that the translation matrix helpfully labeled as pre-aggression vocalization. So the students of Varith gave the Croth cub a wide berth. All of them, that is, except Sophia Bennett. It was a Tuesday, or the station equivalent, when it happened. Sophia had collected her meal tray from the cafeteria line and found her usual table near the east window occupied by a study group. She scanned the room. Nearly every seat was taken. The lunch crowd had peaked early. She spotted an open chair at a corner table and moved toward it, tray balanced in both hands, bag slung over one shoulder. She set her things down, pulled out the chair, and sat. Only then did she notice the cub. It was tucked under the adjacent table, wedged between the table leg and the wall. A young Croth, barely past the age of first molting, which meant its spine fur was still the soft gray of infancy rather than the deep black of a mature adult. It had a torn satchel strap gripped in both forepaws and was chewing it with the focused determination of something that had decided the leather was a personal enemy. The cub looked up at her. Sophia looked down at the cub. The cub made a small sound, not the pre-aggression vocalization the translation matrix flagged, but something quieter, something younger. The matrix rendered it simply as hungry. Sophia glanced around. No adult Croth in sight. The cub was alone, which meant it had wandered from wherever the pack was gathering, probably the Croth-designated wing on the station's north side. It wasn't unusual for cubs to drift during the day, following scent trails or simply curiosity. But this one had apparently followed its curiosity all the way to the cafeteria and arrived with no meal and no pack member to provide one. She looked at her tray. The cafeteria had given her a double portion of the protein strips today, some kind of station promotion. She had already planned to leave half of them. She picked up the portion she had not yet touched and leaned slowly toward the cub, keeping her movements unhurried, her posture low and non-looming. She had read enough about Croth body language in the exchange program's cultural briefing to know that height and speed were the two things that triggered a defensive response. She set the protein strips on the floor, just within reach of the cub's forepaws, and straightened back up. The cub stared at the food, then at her, then at the food again. It ate. Sophia ate her own meal and read her notes for the afternoon lecture, and the cub finished its portion and made the small sound again. Not hungry this time. The matrix blinked once and rendered it as full/safe. She smiled, finished her water, packed her notes, and went to class. She forgot about it by evening. Liam Carter did not let her forget for long. Liam was her lab partner, a third-year xenobiology student who had the particular gift of knowing things Sophia had not yet realized were important. He found her at breakfast the next morning, set his tray down across from hers, and stared at her with an expression she could not immediately categorize. "You fed a Croth cub yesterday," he said. "It was hungry," she said, reaching for her coffee. "Sophia." He leaned forward slightly. "Do you know what you did?" She paused. "I gave a small animal some protein strips. You provided food to a Croth cub that was separated from its pack." He said it slowly, as though the words themselves carried weight. Croth feeding behavior is deeply pack-coded. When a member of the pack provides food to a cub, it is not a favor. It is not kindness. It is a declaration of responsibility. The pack records it. They remember it. Sophia set down her coffee. "I'm not a member of the pack." "You are now," Liam said. "Provisionally." By action. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked past him. At the entrance to the cafeteria, 3 adult Croths stood in a loose formation. They were massive, the largest standing nearly 2 meters at the shoulder, with black spine fur raised to full display and amber eyes scanning the room with quiet intensity. Students near the entrance moved aside instinctively. The Croth walked slowly through the cafeteria. They were not rushing. They were not threatening anyone. They were moving with the particular deliberateness of something that knew exactly where it was going and had no interest in anything along the way. They stopped at Sophia's table, the largest one. An elder female, Sophia realized, based on the silver threading through the spine fur at her neck, lowered her head once. Not a bow, something more like an acknowledgement, a placement of regard. Then all three of them turned and positioned themselves, one near the cafeteria entrance, one near the east window, one standing just beside the table, close enough to cast a shadow across Sophia's tray. They stood there, guarding. Liam stared at them, then at Sophia. His voice had dropped to something approaching reverence. "They're guarding your seat." "I can see that," Sophia said quietly. "The whole pack," he said and pointed. She looked. At the cafeteria entrance, two more Croth had appeared. Near the service corridor, another. Outside the window, she could see the broad silhouette of at least one more standing on the concourse, spine fur visible through the glass. "How many are in a Croth pack?" she asked. "Varies," Liam said. 7 to 12 adults for a mid-sized traveling unit. He counted under his breath. "This one has 9. And they are all currently standing in or immediately around the cafeteria where you are eating breakfast." Sophia picked up her coffee again. Her hand was steady. Inside, her mind was running through every moment of the previous day. The tray, the cub, the quiet sound the translation matrix had rendered as full/safe. She had not done it for a reason. She had done it because the animal was small and hungry and she had extra food. It had not occurred to her to calculate consequences, because the only consequence she had imagined was a cub eating a meal. Across the cafeteria, a group of second-year Dorvani students, a species known for their composure and their encyclopedic cultural knowledge, had gone entirely still, watching the Croth formation with expressions Sophia could only describe as stunned. One of them caught her eye and made a gesture she had learned early in the exchange program. The Dorvani open palm acknowledgement, used only in the presence of something they considered genuinely significant. They were making it at her. The Croth did not leave at the end of breakfast. They were at the cafeteria entrance at lunch. Two of them followed, at a respectful distance, as Sophia walked to her afternoon lecture hall and waited outside the door for the duration of the class. When she emerged, they fell back into position behind her, unhurried and massive and entirely calm. By the third day, the other students had stopped staring. They simply moved aside. By the end of the week, Sophia's table in the cafeteria was the most sought-after seating arrangement on the station, not because it was comfortable, but because nothing that wished anyone harm would come within 30 meters of it. The cub found her again on the 5th day. It climbed up onto the bench beside her during lunch, pressed its gray-furred flank against her arm, and made a sound the translation matrix rendered as something it had never rendered for any human on record. Pack/chosen. Sophia put down her fork and looked at the small creature beside her, at the amber eyes watching her with the same focused attention it had given the protein strips on their first meeting. "You're going to make my life very complicated," she told it. The cub blinked once, slowly, the way Croth did when they were entirely at ease. Liam, sitting across from her, was writing in his research notebook with barely contained excitement. "For the record," he said, "I'm citing this entire week in my xenosociology thesis." "Happy to help," Sophia said. Outside the cafeteria window, 9 Croths stood in easy formation across the station concourse, spine first settled, eyes watching the corridors, keeping her safe. Not because they had been asked, not because of protocol or treaty or obligation, because a human girl had looked at something small and hungry and had not walked past. That was enough. For the Croth, it had always been enough.